A deep hole on a tiny island has guarded a secret for over 200 years. This is the legendary Oak Island Money Pit, a mystery that has consumed fortunes and lives in a relentless search for the truth. By the end of our journey, you will understand all the compelling theories about who built this incredible puzzle. Was it pirates hiding their plunder or knights protecting a sacred relic? The clues left behind point in a dozen different directions, and the answer is more complex than anyone imagined. What kind of person do you think would go to such incredible lengths to hide something forever? The story begins not with a grand expedition, but with a simple curiosity. In 1795, a young man named Daniel McGinnis decided to explore the then uninhabited Oak Island. Pushing through the dense forest, he stumbled upon a sight that would change everything. There, beneath an old oak tree with a branch worn strangely smooth, was a clear circular depression in the earth. It looked as if the ground had sunk, a perfect bowl suggesting something had been buried there long ago. This was no random sinkhole, it was a deliberate mark. McGinnis' mind raced with local tales of pirates, and he knew he had to return. He enlisted two friends, John Smith and Anthony Vaughan, and together they began to dig with little more than shovels and hope. Just a few feet down, their shovels struck not dirt but a layer of carefully laid flagstones. They pried them up, their excitement growing. Digging deeper, they hit a platform of sturdy oak logs set firmly into the sides of the pit. They removed the logs only to find more earth and then another identical platform 10 feet further down. This pattern repeated, a maddening and deliberate design. Who would go to such trouble, burying something so deep and protecting it with such a complex, layered shield? Each layer they uncovered erased any doubt that this was a natural formation. They were not just digging a hole, they were unraveling a masterfully constructed puzzle, a barrier designed to discourage and exhaust anyone who dared to seek what lay at the bottom. This relentless, layered defense was the very spark that ignited the legend, a flame of obsession that would burn for centuries. Of course, those first treasure hunters immediately thought of pirates. The idea of a buried chest overflowing with gold doubloons and pieces of eight was a powerful and romantic one. It was a story straight out of a sailor's tale. And the most famous name to surface was Captain William Kidd. In the late 1600s, Kidd was a privateer, a sailor licensed by the British Crown to attack enemy ships. But he famously turned to outright piracy, amassing a fortune that was never fully recovered by the authorities. Legends swirled that he had hidden his greatest treasure somewhere along the North American coast before his capture. Oak Island, with its secluded coves and dense forests, seemed a perfect hiding spot. Then there was the notorious Blackbeard, who once boasted that only he and the devil knew where his money was buried. Could this be the devil's secret? The historical timing fits. The golden age of piracy was winding down in the early 1700s, and many captains were looking for a safe place to stash their loot, a treasure trove to retire on later. The sheer effort of the money pit, with its deep, booby-trapped shaft, suggests a crew of experienced sailors used to complex tasks like building ships or constructing fortifications. They would have had the manpower and the skill to engineer such a thing. But is a pirate's treasure truly worth this much effort? A pirate typically wanted quick access to his wealth. They were not known for long-term planning. Why go through the incredible labor of building a pit with layers of logs and clay, a project that could take months when you could just bury a chest in a cave and mark it on a map? The Oak Island pit feels less like a simple hiding place and more like a permanent vault, designed to protect something far more valuable than gold and to protect it for a very, very long time. But the sheer ambition of the money pit points to a far older and more sophisticated origin than any pirate crew. The design speaks of an order, a discipline, and a profound sense of permanence. This is where the theory of the Knights Templar enters the story, a theory that transforms the hunt from a search for gold into a quest for holy relics. Imagine not pirates but warrior monks, guardians of unimaginable secrets, arriving on these shores centuries before Columbus. The Knights Templar were a powerful military order founded to protect pilgrims in the Holy Land. They grew immensely wealthy and influential, but in the early 1300s the King of France turned against them, accusing them of heresy and having them arrested, tortured, and executed. According to the legend, before the crackdown, a fleet of Templar ships laden with their vast treasure and most sacred relics vanished from the French port of La Rochelle. Where did they go? Some researchers believe they sailed across the Atlantic, using maps and navigational knowledge gained from their time in the Middle East, and found refuge in the New World. Oak Island, with its intricate system of flood tunnels and layered defenses, perfectly matches the kind of secure, long-term vault the Templars would need to protect something of divine importance. What could be so valuable that it would warrant an ocean crossing and an engineering project meant to last a millennium? The theories are the stuff of legends themselves, the Holy Grail, the Ark of the Covenant, or perhaps even lost manuscripts that could rewrite religious history. These are not items you bury in a simple hole, they are treasures you enshrine, and the clues do not stop with the pit's construction. On the island, stones with strange markings have been discovered. One, known as the inscribed stone, was reportedly found deep within the money pit itself, covered in symbols. While the original stone was lost, copies of the inscription were made, and some researchers claim the symbols are a crude form of Templar cipher. Another artifact, a Christian cross made of lead and believed to date from the medieval period, was also found. The timeline is compelling. The Templars were suppressed in the 1300s, and carbon dating of wood from the original Oak Island platforms has returned dates from that same general era. Could a small group of these persecuted knights have sailed to this remote island and constructed this monumental secret, a final refuge for their most sacred trust, leaving behind symbols as a message for those who would come after? This theory elevates the mystery from a treasure hunt to a sacred mission. Yet the engineering of the money pit suggests more than just a hidden treasure, it points to a symbolic design. This brings us to the enigmatic world of the Freemasons. Their history is deeply interwoven with that of the Knights Templar, with many believing that surviving Templars found refuge within early Masonic lodges, bringing their secrets and sacred building knowledge with them. The very structure of the Oak Island pit echoes the symbolic chambers and degrees of initiation within Freemasonry. Think of the successive layers of oak platforms, each one reached only after laborious digging. This mirrors the Masonic journey of progressive enlightenment, where a member passes through different degrees, each revealing a deeper layer of knowledge. The pit itself can be seen as a representation of the hidden vault, a central Masonic allegory for safeguarding ancient wisdom. What kind of wisdom might they have buried? It may not have been gold, but something they considered far more precious, perhaps lost manuscripts, sacred texts, or historical records that challenged the established narratives of their time. The evidence extends beyond mere symbolism. Certain markings and geometric patterns associated with the island's layout and the placement of various stone markers have been interpreted by some researchers as distinctly Masonic in nature. These are not random scratches, but deliberate signs left by individuals trained in a tradition of symbolic communication. The flood tunnels, a devastatingly clever feat of hydraulic engineering, also fit this picture. They are not just a booby trap, they are a permanent, self-renewing guardian, a defense system worthy of an organization that built its reputation on architecture and perpetual secrecy. So were the Freemasons the architects of this labyrinth. The theory suggests that a group of highly educated, well-organized men, possessing advanced knowledge of engineering and a profound reason for absolute secrecy, came to Oak Island. They were not hiding a pirate's chest, but constructing a timeless archive, a vault designed to protect its contents until the world was ready for their revelation. This transforms the pit from a simple hole in the ground into a monumental time capsule, its very construction a silent ritual waiting for its final degree to be unlocked. But what if the treasure was not gold or a holy relic, but the very funds needed to run an army? This leads us to a far more pragmatic and historically grounded theory, one involving the British military. During times of war, securing a fortune is a matter of strategic necessity. The American Revolution and the later War of 1812 created immense pressure for the British Army and Royal Navy. They needed a completely secure location to hide their payroll, the immense sums of money required to pay thousands of soldiers and sailors. If that money were captured, their entire war effort in the region could collapse. A remote island off the coast of Nova Scotia, still under British control, would have been the perfect secret bank vault. The engineering of the money pit itself strongly supports this idea. The sophisticated flood tunnels are not just a pirate's booby trap, they are a masterclass in military engineering. Think of a fortress designed with multiple layers of defense. The British Royal Engineers of that era were famed for their skill in siege works, fortifications, and complex hydraulics. They possessed the precise knowledge needed to design a system that would use the ocean itself as a permanent guard. It is the kind of project a military unit could execute with disciplined labor and a clear, urgent purpose. Why go to such incredible lengths? Because this was not a temporary stash. This was a national secret, a reserve fund that had to be protected for months or even years, safe from enemy spies and privateers. The sheer, back-breaking labor involved, moving tons of earth and rock, precisely aligning tunnels to the shoreline, is exactly the kind of large-scale project a military garrison could accomplish. They had the manpower, the organization, and the technical skill. What did they hide? It might not have been chests of coins, but something even more sensitive. Some researchers suggest the pit could have held secret documents, treaties, or lists of loyalist sympathizers, information that would have been catastrophic if it fell into American hands. The timeline fits perfectly. The wars created both the motive and the opportunity. So perhaps the mystery of Oak Island is not one of ancient knights, but of a more recent yet equally compelling historical drama. A drama where the treasure was not for personal gain, but for the survival of an empire's military campaign, hidden away with such brilliant and devastating efficiency that it remains lost to this very day. Yet another theory sails into view, this one from the decks of mighty Spanish galleons. Picture the vast treasure fleets of the Spanish Empire lumbering through the Atlantic, their holds filled with gold and silver plundered from the empires of the New World. These ships were floating banks, and they were constantly hunted by privateers, pirates, and violent storms. The coastline of Nova Scotia was a notorious graveyard for ships, a place of fog and treacherous rocks. What if a damaged galleon, desperate to save its royal cargo from sinking or capture, made for the nearest sheltered cove? That cove could have been at Oak Island. The crew, skilled in excavation from their mining of that very treasure, would have had both the motive and the ability to create a secure, deep pit. This would not have been a permanent hiding place, but a temporary cache. The plan would be to return with a rescue ship, retrieve the king's fortune, and continue on to Spain. But what if they never returned? A ship could sink on its way for help, the crew could be lost to disease or conflict, and the secret of the temporary cache would die with them, leaving the treasure to become a permanent mystery. The recovered artifacts on the island add weight to this idea. A Spanish copper coin dating from the 1600s was found, and even more compellingly, a decorative piece of a Spanish sword, an item likely carried by an officer. These are not the kinds of things that simply wash ashore. They are personal effects lost by the very men who might have been digging that pit under the cover of darkness. The sheer volume of treasure moved by the Spanish fleets is almost beyond comprehension, and records from the time are notoriously incomplete. A single ship going missing with its cargo was a known risk, an accepted cost of doing business for the empire. Could the Oak Island money pit be the unintended result of such a disaster? A treasure of unimaginable value buried not by design, but by desperate circumstance, waiting for a salvage operation that never came. There is another name from the Age of Sail that carries as much weight as any pirate, a man who was not an outlaw but a national hero operating with a royal license. Sir Francis Drake, the famed Elizabethan privateer, circumnavigated the globe and plundered immense wealth from the Spanish, filling the coffers of England. His voyages took him right past the shores of Nova Scotia. We know he claimed a land he called Nova Albion, somewhere on the North American Pacific coast, but his exact routes home were often secret, designed to confuse his enemies. What if one of those routes led him to the quiet, sheltered waters of Mahone Bay? The sheer scale of Drake's captured treasure is almost beyond counting. After raiding Spanish mule trains and ports, his ship, the Golden Hind, was so heavily laden with gold, silver, and precious jewels that it was a marvel it could even sail. He would have needed an incredibly secure place to store a portion of this fortune, a reserve too vast and politically sensitive to bring immediately into an English port. A hidden repository built by his skilled crew far from prying eyes would have been a strategic masterstroke. The complexity of the money pit aligns perfectly with Drake's resources and intellect. He commanded not a band of cutthroats, but a disciplined naval crew and skilled shipwrights capable of sophisticated engineering. Constructing a deep, booby-trapped vault with a series of platforms and ingenious flood tunnels is exactly the kind of long-term project such a crew could undertake. This was not a hasty burial, but a calculated, permanent deposit. The timeline is strikingly plausible. In the late 1500s, after his most successful raids, Drake had both the motive and the means to create such a cache. He was a man who played a long game, thinking in terms of national strategy and personal legacy. Could the Oak Island pit be his ultimate safety deposit box, a secret known only to him and his most trusted officers? Tragically, Drake died of dysentery on a later voyage, taking the full secret of its location with him to his grave. His lost treasure, intended to fund future English ventures or serve as a personal fortune, would then simply wait, its purpose forgotten, its very existence fading into the local legend that would eventually draw Daniel McGinnis to that strange depression under the oak tree. The French military presence in Nova Scotia adds another compelling layer to this enigma. Just a short sail from Oak Island stood the immense fortress of Louisbourg, a sprawling French stronghold and a key hub of power in the New World. In the mid-1700s, this fortress was under constant threat from the British. When the final, crushing siege began in 1758, the French commanders would have faced a desperate dilemma. What do you do with the royal treasury, the payroll for your troops, and the personal fortunes of the colony's elite? You cannot let it fall into enemy hands. The British Navy blockaded the sea, making a clean escape nearly impossible. The solution would require a stroke of genius, a place to hide the wealth so securely that even if the fortress fell, the treasure would remain forever safe for the French crown. This is where the theory of French military engineers comes to life. The men who designed and built Louisbourg were masters of their craft. They were experts in geology, hydrology, and complex earthworks, capable of constructing formidable defenses that could withstand cannon fire and siege. Creating a deep, booby-trapped vault on a nearby, inconspicuous island would have been a task well within their capabilities. The famous flood tunnels are not just a pirate's trick, they are a precise feat of military engineering, a deliberate use of the environment as a weapon. These engineers understood water pressure, tidal patterns, and how to channel the sea itself to create a permanent, self-resetting trap. It is the kind of ingenious, long-term thinking you would expect from a corps of professionals working under direct orders. They were not hiding a single chest, they were safeguarding the financial lifeblood of a colony. Imagine teams of soldiers and engineers working in secret under the cover of night, using their disciplined labor to excavate the pit and construct its intricate defenses. They had the manpower, the skill, and most importantly, a powerful and urgent motive. When Louisburg finally fell, the secret of the treasure's location may have died with the officers who oversaw its burial, or been lost in the chaotic aftermath of the defeat. The treasure, intended for retrieval after a French victory that never came, was simply forgotten, leaving behind only the silent, brilliant, and empty vault on Oak Island. There is a human story woven into this mystery, one not of empires or pirates, but of a people fighting for their very survival. While the British and French armies clashed over forts, a different community was being torn from its home. The Acadians, French settlers who had farmed the Maritimes for generations, were forcibly expelled by the British in what became known as the Great Upheaval. Their farms were burned, their families were scattered onto ships bound for distant shores, and their entire way of life was erased from the map. In the face of such a catastrophe, what would you do to preserve the things you held most dear? This is where a quieter, more poignant theory for the money pit takes root. Imagine not soldiers or knights, but farmers and fishermen acting in desperate secrecy. These were people who knew the land and the sea intimately. They understood the tides of Mahone Bay and the hidden contours of Oak Island. As the British deportation orders loomed, the community leaders would have faced an impossible choice. They could not take their accumulated wealth, their church relics, or their important documents with them into exile. Letting these items fall into the hands of the enemy was unthinkable. So they devised a final, heartbreaking act of defiance. Using the collective labor of their people, they could have constructed a deep, secure vault to serve as a time capsule for their culture. The very design of the pit makes a strange kind of sense from this perspective. The layered platforms are not just defenses, they are symbolic layers of a community burying its heart. The infamous flood tunnels, often seen as a malicious trap, could be reinterpreted as a sacred seal. By harnessing the ocean, they created a guardian that required specific knowledge to bypass, ensuring that only someone who knew the secret, perhaps a returning descendant, could ever recover what was hidden. This was not a treasure of gold, but a treasure of memory. What might they have buried? The community's shared wealth, yes, perhaps coins and silver saved over generations. But more importantly, they might have hidden the sacred chalice from their church, the baptismal records of their children, the land deeds that proved their right to the soil, or even the personal journals that told their story. These were items of no value to a British soldier, but they were the soul of the Acadian people. The project would have required immense secrecy and trust, a final communal effort carried out in the dead of night. This theory explains the sheer labor of the pit through the power of many hands united by a common, urgent cause. It connects the mystery to a documented historical tragedy, giving the Oak Island enigma a profound and deeply human dimension. The pit becomes not a greedy secret, but a sorrowful one, a buried hope meant to be unearthed by a future generation that could finally come home. Deep within the money pit, buried below one of those countless oak platforms, a discovery was made that seemed to promise a direct answer. Workers unearthed a flat stone, roughly 2 feet long and 1 foot wide, covered in a series of strange, carefully carved symbols. This was the inscribed stone, an artifact that has since become the holy grail of the Oak Island mystery, and its story is as enigmatic as the pit itself. The symbols were not random scratches. They formed a coded message, a cipher that many believed held the ultimate secret of the treasure. A professor later claimed to have translated the inscription, and his interpretation sent shockwaves through the treasure-hunting community. The message read, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. It was a stunning claim, a literal instruction manual from the creators themselves. But then the stone vanished. After being used for years as a fireplace hearth, it was sent to a bookbinder for study and simply disappeared from the historical record. Some say it was lost in a fire, others that it was misplaced, but its absence has only magnified its legend. Without the original stone, we are left with copies of the symbols, and the debate over their true meaning rages on. Was the translation accurate, or was it a hopeful misinterpretation? If the message is genuine, it confirms a vast, specific treasure, but it also raises a profound question. Why would the builders of such an ingenious trap leave behind a clear guide to its location, unless it was meant for someone else, someone who knew how to read the code? The symbols themselves have been analyzed for decades. Some researchers see not a simple message about gold, but a complex cipher pointing to a Masonic or Templar origin. The characters could be a form of pigpen cipher, a code historically used by both groups for secret communication. This suggests the stone was not a treasure map for just anyone, but a marker intended for initiated eyes only, a test to separate the worthy from the unworthy. The stone's disappearance feels like a cruel joke, as if the island itself is guarding its secret. One moment there was a tangible key to the mystery, a rock you could touch that was handled by the original architects. The next it was gone, leaving behind only ghostly impressions and endless speculation. The inscribed stone stands as the central paradox of Oak Island. It is the one piece of evidence that seems to offer a clear solution, yet its loss and the ambiguity of its message only deepen the enigma, proving that on this island, even the answers are designed to be questions. The true genius of the Oak Island trap lies not in its depth but in its relationship with the sea. While treasure hunters were focused on digging down, the real danger was designed to come rushing in. The creators engineered a perfect defense, a network of flood tunnels that connected the deepest parts of the money pit directly to the ocean. This was no simple leak, it was a deliberate, sophisticated hydraulic system. Imagine digging down, foot by exhausting foot, finally breaking through a layer of logs and hearing not the thud of a treasure chest, but the terrifying sound of salt water beginning to hiss and then roar into your shaft. In one dramatic incident, workers breached a barrier and watched in horror as the pit flooded to sea level in minutes, no matter how frantically they tried to bail it out. This proved the water was not seeping in from the sides, it was being channeled. The system was designed with a brilliant understanding of hydrology and tidal pressure. The builders carved or constructed these channels on a precise, gentle slope from the shoreline, allowing the immense pressure of the ocean itself to force water inland and upward into the heart of the pit. It functioned like a siphon, a self-resetting trap that would activate the moment anyone broke the final seal. This means the architects possessed a startlingly advanced knowledge of physics. They understood that water seeks its own level, and they used that fundamental law to create a guardian that would never tire, never sleep, and never fail. The labor involved is almost unimaginable. To create these tunnels, workers would have had to excavate through bedrock, lining the channels with stone and a special non-porous clay called Spanish moss to prevent the water from dissipating into the surrounding soil. This was a monumental undertaking requiring not just brute force, but precise engineering and surveying to ensure the tunnels hit their target deep within the pit. Why go to such extraordinary lengths? A simple pit could be re-excavated by anyone with a shovel, but a pit that actively defends itself, that uses the very environment as a weapon, reveals a chilling determination. The creators did not just want to hide their secret, they wanted to make it physically unreachable, to ensure that whatever lay at the bottom would remain protected for centuries, if not forever. This was not the work of pirates in a hurry, it was the signature of a highly organized, resourceful, and utterly ruthless group, someone who believed their secret was worth more than the lives of anyone who might try to find it. Each artifact pulled from the island's soil is a piece of a shattered story, a physical clue left by the pit's enigmatic architects. The very first discoveries were the oak platforms themselves, found by those initial boys and confirmed by every major excavation since. This was no random collection of driftwood. The logs were carefully hewn, their ends notched to fit securely into the clay walls of the shaft, a sign of deliberate, skilled construction. Even more telling was the layer of a strange, fibrous material found deep within the pit, a substance that baffled early searchers. It was later identified as coconut fiber, a material utterly foreign to the cold waters of Nova Scotia. This fiber, spread in thick mats, acted as a sophisticated filter. It allowed water to seep through slowly while preventing the clay-lined walls from collapsing, a brilliant piece of engineering that points to a global operation. Where did it come from? Coconut fiber in the 1700s was a trade commodity, likely from the Caribbean or Central America, suggesting the builders had access to far-reaching trade routes or had sailed from tropical seas themselves. Then there are the smaller, more haunting finds. Workers sifting through the mud have recovered fragments of human bone, a chilling reminder that this project may have claimed lives. Whose bones were they? Were they laborers who suffered a fatal accident, or were they guardians interred with the secret to ensure their eternal silence? Alongside these grim remains, metal objects have surfaced. A wrought iron scissors was found deep in the clay, a simple, personal tool lost by a worker centuries ago. A copper coin, identified as Spanish and dated to the 1600s, adds another layer to the puzzle. This was not a coin that simply fell from a sailor's pocket. It was found in the context of the workings, suggesting it was there when the pit was being built. Even more compelling is a decorative brass piece, believed to be part of a Spanish naval officer's sword. This is not just treasure, it is an identity tag pointing directly to men of rank and station who were present on the island. Perhaps the most debated physical clue is a small, triangular-shaped stone found on the island's south shore. Dubbed the inscribed stone, it was covered in a series of symbols that have been the subject of intense scrutiny for generations. While the original stone was tragically lost, copies of its inscription survive. Some researchers see a simple coded message about treasure, while others argue the symbols are a complex pigpen cipher, a code historically used by secret societies like the Freemasons or remnants of the Knights Templar. This transforms the stone from a simple signpost into a test, a riddle meant to be read only by those with the proper knowledge. Each of these artifacts, from the grand oak logs to the tiniest copper fragment, acts as a timestamp. When subjected to carbon dating, wood from the original platforms has returned dates ranging from the early 1500s to the mid-1600s. This wide window does not give a single answer, but it powerfully excludes many modern hoax theories. It confirms that someone was on Oak Island, executing a massive engineering project, centuries before the official story of North American exploration even began. These objects are not just random junk, they are the buried testimony of the builders themselves, whispering across the centuries about who they were and why they came to this lonely shore. But beneath the engineering marvels and historical theories lies a darker, more chilling aspect of the Oak Island legend, a whisper of a curse that has shadowed the hunt for generations. It is said that 7 men must die before the island will ever yield its secret. This ominous prophecy has woven itself into the very fabric of the mystery, fueled by a series of tragic and unexplained deaths connected to the excavations. The first life lost was that of a worker named Maynard Kaiser. In the early 1930s, a cable on a drilling apparatus suddenly snapped, and the heavy machinery swung violently, striking Kaiser and killing him instantly. His death was a stark, grim reminder that the island was not just a puzzle, but a dangerous physical place. The tragedies did not stop there. Decades later, in the 1960s, another man named Robert Ristall was working on the island with his own family. Ristall was a true believer, dedicating his life to the search. One day, he was overcome by fumes at the bottom of a shaft and fell into the water. His son, trying desperately to save him, was also overcome, and both perished along with 2 other workers who attempted a rescue. 4 lives were extinguished in a single, heartbreaking afternoon, a devastating event that seemed to give terrible weight to the old curse. The body count continued to climb. Another worker, Cyril Hiltz, died in an explosion, and Carl Grieser, a key figure in the modern search, suffered a fatal heart attack while struggling to move a heavy pump. Each death was different in its mechanics, yet each felt connected by an invisible thread of misfortune tied directly to the money pit. The Curse of the Seven Deaths is more than just a spooky story. It has become a psychological force, a heavy burden carried by every new searcher who steps onto the island. It raises a haunting question. Are these tragedies merely the result of the inherently dangerous work of digging deep pits and moving heavy equipment? Or is there a malevolent design at work, a final, supernatural layer of defense activated by the original architects? The curse implies that the treasure is not merely hidden but actively guarded, and that a blood price must be paid for its discovery. This law transforms the treasure hunt from an intellectual or financial pursuit into a moral and almost mythological quest. It suggests that the ultimate key to Oak Island is not just a map or a code, but a profound and terrible sacrifice, leaving us to wonder if the island's greatest secret is not what is buried there, but the cost of unearthing it. The legend, however, demanded more than just the sweat of a few determined boys. It called for capital, machinery, and the relentless ambition of grown men. Decades after Daniel McGinnis first unearthed those oak platforms, the first organized treasure companies arrived on Oak Island, armed with investors and iron resolve. The Onslow Company, formed in 1849, was the first to bring serious engineering to the mystery. They re-excavated the original money pit, confirming the maddening pattern of oak platforms every 10 feet. But their true discovery came when their auger, a massive drill bit, was lowered deep below the 100-foot mark. The drill passed through a layer of spruce, then hit a startling sequence of objects. It first pierced through what the workers described as several loose metal pieces, perhaps coins. Then it bored through a thick layer of oak, which they interpreted as a chest's lid, before finally striking something immense and solid, a massive obstruction they believed was the treasure vault itself. Even more tantalizing, when the drill was pulled back up, a tiny, glittering clue was caught in the auger's threads. It was a single link of a gold chain. This was not just another theory, it was physical proof. Something of immense value was truly down there, but the island fought back with its oldest weapon. The moment they broke through to that deep chamber, the pit flooded with salt water to sea level, defying all their attempts to pump it dry. The Onslow Company was forced to admit defeat, but they left behind a critical revelation. They were the first to deduce the existence of the flood tunnels, recognizing that the ocean itself was the guardian. They even attempted to block the threat by sinking a new shaft to intercept and plug the main tunnel, but the relentless sea proved too powerful. Their work, though ultimately a failure, transformed the Oak Island mystery. It was no longer a local curiosity, but a documented engineering puzzle with a tangible, golden reward waiting at its heart. The baton was then passed to the Truro Company, formed in 1849. They picked up where Onslow left off, confirming the flood tunnel system with a brilliant, if simple, experiment. They poured bags of dyed flour into the money pit. Soon after, they watched as the dyed water bubbled up from the ocean around the island, specifically from a cove now famously known as Smith's Cove. This proved conclusively that the builders had engineered a direct hydraulic link between the pit and the sea, a channel over 500 feet long. The Truro men, now knowing the source of their enemy, mounted a direct assault on Smith's Cove. As they excavated the beach, they made one of the most bizarre and telling discoveries in the entire saga. Buried beneath the sand and a layer of seaweed, they uncovered a meticulously constructed filter system. It was a network of stone drains laid in a fan-like pattern, all channeling water back toward a single sump pit that fed the flood tunnel. This was not a natural formation. It was a man-made, five-fingered collector designed to constantly feed seawater into the defense system. the beach itself was a machine. The Truro Company, like all those before them, was ultimately driven back by financial exhaustion and the island's unforgiving defenses, yet their contributions were monumental. They moved the mystery from speculation into the realm of documented, complex engineering. They provided the first real evidence of gold, mapped the enemy's strategy, and revealed that the entire coastline was part of the design. These early companies laid the groundwork for every modern searcher, proving that the secret of Oak Island was protected by a genius that was both brutal and beautiful. The obsession with Oak Island was not confined to treasure hunters and engineers. It reached the highest levels of power, even capturing the imagination of a future president. In 1909, a young Franklin Delano Roosevelt, then a law student, joined a group called the Old Gold Salvage Company. He was enthralled by the mystery, investing his own money and spending time on the island, personally reviewing the maps and the progress of the dig. His involvement, though brief, cemented the money pit's status as a national enigma, a puzzle so compelling it could intrigue a man destined to lead a nation through its greatest crises. Roosevelt maintained a lifelong interest in the search, a private fascination that underscored the pit's unique pull. But for every powerful man intrigued from a distance, there were those who gave everything from up close. The 1960s brought a man named Robert Ristall to the island, a former daredevil motorcyclist who arrived with his entire family. They lived in a small trailer, a testament to their total commitment. For years, Ristall worked with a relentless, almost spiritual belief, convinced he was on the verge of a historic breakthrough. He focused his efforts on a shallow area near the so-called money pit, believing the real secret lay in a side tunnel or a cleverly disguised booby trap. The work was grueling and perilous, involving deep hand-dug shafts and old, unreliable equipment. Then, on a summer day in 1965, tragedy struck without warning. Robert was working at the bottom of a shaft when he was overcome by invisible fumes, likely carbon monoxide from a gasoline-powered pump. He collapsed into the murky, waist-deep water. His son, Bobby, seeing his father in distress, scrambled down the ladder to save him. He, too, was immediately overcome by the toxic gas and fell. Another worker, Carl Greaser, went down next in a desperate rescue attempt, and then a fourth man, Cyril Hiltz. One by one, they were all defeated by the same invisible killer. 4 lives were lost in a matter of minutes, a devastating event that shattered the Ristall family and sent shockwaves through the treasure-hunting world. The curse of the 7 deaths had claimed its most heartbreaking victims, not from a collapsing tunnel or a flash flood, but from the very air they breathed. The Ristall tragedy was a grim turning point. It was no longer a historical anecdote, but a modern, visceral reminder of the very real danger that clung to the island. It proved that the money pit's defenses were not just mechanical or hydrological, but almost existential, as if the ground itself resisted those who sought to violate its secret. This profound loss forced a somber question upon everyone who followed. What kind of treasure could possibly be worth such a sacrifice? The story of the Ristalls is the human cost of the legend, a dark chapter where fascination collided with fatal reality, leaving behind a legacy not of gold but of immense and enduring sorrow. For decades, the story of Oak Island was one of tragic failure and fading hope. Then, 2 brothers from Michigan decided to risk it all. Rick and Marty Lagina had been captivated by the legend since childhood, and in 2006, they acquired a controlling interest in the island, launching the most comprehensive and technologically advanced search in history. Their efforts were documented in the History Channel series The Curse of Oak Island, transforming a niche historical mystery into a global obsession. The Laginas brought more than just funding and passion. They brought a scientific method to the hunt. They deployed seismic tomography to map underground anomalies, used sonic drilling to extract core samples from deep within the money pit, and employed massive cranes and industrial pumps to battle the ancient flood tunnels. This was no longer just about digging, it was about scanning the very bones of the island. Their most compelling work has centered on the mysterious Oak Island swamp. Conventional wisdom said it was a natural feature, but the brothers suspected it was man-made, a colossal undertaking to conceal a ship's landing or another entry point. Their investigations revealed a perfectly rectangular, stone-lined structure buried deep beneath the peat, a finding that defied any natural explanation. Draining sections of the swamp yielded stunning artifacts, from a centuries-old piece of parchment and a human bone fragment to a decorative silver ring. Each find was a data point, building a new picture of the island's secret history. Beyond the swamp, their drilling rigs have pierced what they believe could be the original treasure chamber, bringing up wood from the 1600s and even traces of silver and gold. The sheer volume of evidence they have compiled is unprecedented. They have not just followed the old maps, they have created new ones, revealing a complex web of tunnels, wharves, and structures that suggest a large, coordinated effort spanning centuries. The McGinnis brothers have done more than just search for treasure. They have renewed the entire narrative. Their transparent, determined quest, filled with both exhilarating breakthroughs and frustrating setbacks, has allowed millions of viewers to become part of the story. They have made the hunt a shared, modern experience, proving that the greatest treasure of Oak Island may not be gold, but the relentless human pursuit of a truth that has remained just out of reach for over 200 years. One of the strangest features on Oak Island defies every natural explanation. It is the swamp, a murky, stagnant body of water that sits incongruously on an island otherwise composed of rock and forest. For generations, it was dismissed as just that, a swamp. But what if this waterlogged ground is not a quirk of nature, but the single greatest deception ever engineered on the island? The theory is as radical as it is compelling, that the entire swamp is a colossal man-made structure, a flooded basin created to hide a monumental secret. The geological evidence is startling. Core samples and seismic scans reveal that the swamp basin is an almost perfect rectangle, an unnatural shape that simply does not occur in nature. Its bottom is not soft, organic silt all the way down. Instead, explorers have found a hard, impenetrable layer far below the surface, a floor that feels like pavement. This is not the work of time and decay, it is the work of human hands. The logistics are staggering to consider. Imagine a workforce centuries ago, excavating a massive pit and lining it with tons of stone and a special, non-porous clay to create a watertight seal. They would have then deliberately flooded it, turning their own construction into a permanent, misleading feature of the landscape. Why would anyone go to such insane lengths? Because the real entrance to the treasure vault was never in the obvious money pit. That was a decoy, a brilliantly designed trap to exhaust and bankrupt anyone who went looking. The true access point, the theory suggests, lies hidden beneath the silent, deceptive waters of the swamp. The artifacts pulled from its muddy depths scream of human activity. When the McGinnis brothers and their team undertook the monumental task of draining sections of the swamp, they did not just find mud. They recovered a hand-wrought, centuries-old metal spearhead. They found a shard of parchment, a fragile piece of written material that had no business being buried in a natural peat bog. They unearthed a decorative silver ring, a personal item lost by someone of status. Most tellingly, they discovered a human bone, carbon dated to the 1600s. These are not random objects washed in by the tide. They are the scattered belongings of the people who built this place, lost during the frantic, secretive work of creating their aquatic camouflage. The swamp does not feel like a place, it feels like a crime scene. Every core sample, every drained section reveals another piece of the puzzle. The stone structures, the foreign artifacts, the very shape of the basin itself, all point to a terrifying conclusion. The greatest secret of Oak Island is not what is buried, but where it is buried. The real treasure lies waiting, not at the bottom of a booby-trapped shaft, but concealed under a mask of still, dark water, a deception so complete it has fooled the world for centuries. A small, heavy object pulled from the muddy shore would become one of the most significant artifacts ever found on Oak Island. It was a simple cross, crudely fashioned from a single piece of lead. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable, but its discovery sent a shockwave through the search. This was not a modern trinket. Scientific analysis revealed its composition was consistent with lead mined in Europe centuries ago, potentially dating it to the medieval period, long before Christopher Columbus set sail. This single object, found not in a controlled excavation but on the surface, felt like a message deliberately left behind. It powerfully fuels the theory of pre-Columbian transatlantic travel. Who could have carried such an item to this remote island in the 14 or 1500s? The Knights Templar are the prime suspects. A lead cross is a humble, personal object of faith, the kind of relic a devout warrior monk might carry. It is not a treasure of gold, but a treasure of belief, a symbol that points directly to the presence of European Christians on this continent long before it was thought possible. This cross is a tangible piece of evidence that aligns perfectly with the legend of the Templar fleet escaping persecution, crossing the ocean, and establishing a new refuge. It suggests they were not just here to hide a treasure, but to build a new life, and this cross was a part of their daily devotion, lost by a knight on a rocky beach 700 years ago. The implications are staggering. If this cross is authentic to that era, it rewrites a chapter of history. It means that medieval Europeans not only knew of North America, but were actively using it, perhaps as a secret sanctuary. The cross acts as a key, unlocking a narrative where Oak Island was not an isolated pit, but a central point in a vast, secret network. It transforms the island from a potential pirate stash into a potential holy site, a landing point for one of history's most enigmatic and persecuted orders. This small, unassuming piece of lead carries more weight than any chest of gold, for it holds the power to change our understanding of the world. A different kind of clue emerged not from the mud, but from a family's attic. This was a hatchment, a large, diamond-shaped funeral emblem traditionally displayed to proclaim a family's lineage and heraldry after death. The specific symbols on this particular hatchment, however, seem to tell a more clandestine story. Researchers examining its intricate details noticed patterns and motifs that did not align with any known local families. Instead, they pointed toward a shadowy 19th-century organization known as the Knights of the Golden Circle. This was a secretive American society born in the years before the Civil War, with ambitions to create a vast slave-holding empire circling the Gulf of Mexico. The group amassed significant influence and, according to persistent legend, an enormous treasury to fund their cause. When the Confederacy fell, their vast hoard of gold and silver, intended to finance a new war for Southern independence, needed to vanish. A remote island off the coast of Canada, far from the reach of Union forces, would have been the perfect bank vault. The engineering of the money pit fits this theory in a new way. The complex flood tunnels and deep shaft are not the work of medieval knights, but of a highly motivated, well-organized modern group. The Knights of the Golden Circle included engineers, military men, and politicians, individuals with the knowledge and resources to execute such a project. The hatchment then becomes a potential marker. In the language of heraldry and secret societies, such emblems were often used to convey messages to the initiated. Could this funeral symbol have been a coded map or a signpost left to guide future members to the recovery of the lost Confederate treasury? This theory ties the mystery to a more recent and deeply troubled chapter of American history. It suggests the treasure is not ancient but modern, not a sacred relic but a political fund, buried not to preserve it for eternity but to resurrect it for a future conflict that never came. The gold of a lost cause, hidden with such finality, waits still, its purpose as forgotten as the society that swore to protect it. Could the entire mystery of Oak Island rest on a simple geological mistake? Some skeptics argue that the money pit is not a man-made vault at all, but a natural sinkhole or a deep limestone fissure. They point to the island's geology, noting that the region is prone to such formations. Groundwater can dissolve underlying rock over millennia, causing the surface to collapse into a perfect circular depression. The oak logs and layers of clay in this view are nothing more than ancient forest debris that fell into the hole and became compacted over centuries. The flooding could be explained by a natural connection to the water table or a subterranean channel linked to the sea, a feature not uncommon in coastal areas. If this is true, then every treasure hunt has been a tragic case of misidentification, a 200-year-long wild goose chase sparked by a quirk of nature. But this theory shatters against the weight of the evidence. The platforms found by the first boys were not random logs. They were carefully hewn and notched, fitted securely into the sides of the shaft in a way that natural debris simply never could. The pattern was too perfect, too repetitive. Each platform was found exactly every 10 feet, a deliberate interval that screams of human design. Then there are the materials themselves. The coconut fiber found deep within the pit is the ultimate contradiction. Coconut fiber does not grow in Nova Scotia. It is a tropical material, and its presence in such quantity means it was brought there, likely as ship's ballast, and then deliberately spread as a filtering agent. This is not the work of nature, it is the signature of a global operation. The flood tunnels are another engineering marvel that nature could not replicate. The dyed flour test proved a direct manufactured link from the money pit to Smith's Cove. The intricate 5-finger drain system discovered under the beach, made of stones and eelgrass, is a sophisticated water collection device, not a random accumulation. Every attempt to dismiss the pit as a natural formation runs into these stubborn physical facts. The geology of the island provides the canvas, but the evidence of human hands is the unmistakable painting upon it. Someone used the landscape, understanding its faults and its waterways, to construct a labyrinth. They did not find a hole and drop a treasure in. They engineered a fortress from the ground up, weaving natural elements into a brilliant defensive whole. This was not an accident of geology, but a masterpiece of deception. Behind every great treasure hunt lies a patron with deep pockets. The search for Oak Island's secret has always been a game for the wealthy, a financial black hole that has consumed the fortunes of countless investors. Yet among these backers, certain names stand out, their involvement shadowed by whispers of a deeper, more intimate knowledge of the mystery. Could some of these financiers have been more than mere speculators? Could they have been initiates, men with access to secret traditions passed down from the pit's original architects? The very first organized treasure company, the Onslow Company, was bankrolled by a consortium of local Nova Scotia businessmen. Their motives seemed purely financial, driven by the promise of gold. But as the hunt grew more complex, so too did the profiles of its supporters. In the late 19th century, a powerful and secretive figure emerged, a man named Henry L. Bowdoin. He was a mining engineer and the head of the Old Gold Salvage Group, but more intriguingly, he was a prominent and high-ranking Freemason. This detail alone sends a ripple through the conspiracy. If the Freemasons were indeed the original builders, then a man like Bowdoin would not have been just another investor. He would have been a keeper of the flame, potentially privy to oral histories or coded manuscripts within his lodge that spoke of the island's true purpose. His entire expedition could have been less a blind search and more a targeted recovery mission, guided by secrets lost to the outside world. Another compelling backer was Frederick Blair, a man who held the treasure rights for decades and poured his life savings into the search. Blair was famously tenacious, but was he also connected? While no direct link to a secret society has been proven for Blair, His unwavering, almost spiritual belief in the treasure's existence suggests a conviction that went beyond simple greed. It hints at a man who might have seen himself not as a fortune hunter, but as a fulfiller of a prophecy, a person chosen to complete a task begun centuries earlier. Then there was the enigmatic figure of Gilbert Hedden, a wealthy New Jersey businessman who became obsessed in the 1930s. Hedden was not just a financier, he was a researcher who traveled to England to scour archives, convinced he had found a connection between the Oak Island symbols and the works of Sir Francis Bacon, a man often linked to the Rosicrucians and early Freemasonry. Hedden's pursuit was intellectual and symbolic, driven by a belief that he was deciphering a code left by a brilliant hidden hand. His backing was not merely financial, it was ideological. This pattern raises a chilling possibility. What if the treasure of Oak Island was never meant to be found by just anyone? What if it was designed to be recovered only by those with the correct knowledge, the right keys passed down through generations of a secretive few? The involvement of men like Bowdoin and Hedden suggests that the hunt itself might be a second layer of the original puzzle, a centuries-long test to see if the descendants of the builders could one day prove themselves worthy of reclaiming what was left behind. The financial backers, then, are not just a footnote in the story. They are potential characters in a much larger, still unfolding drama, their motives and affiliations adding a profound layer of conspiracy to the soil of Oak Island. A cipher is more than a secret, it is a conversation with the future. The creators of the Oak Island mystery may have left behind not just a physical trap, but an intellectual one, a labyrinth of symbols designed to be navigated only by a mind with the correct key. This theory transforms every carved stone and every strange marking on old maps from a simple clue into a piece of an encrypted message. The most famous of these is, of course, the inscribed stone from the money pit itself. While the original is lost, the recorded symbols have been scrutinized for generations. Some see a simple substitution cipher, where each symbol represents a letter, leading to that famous translation, 40 feet below, 2 million pounds are buried. But others argue the code is far more sophisticated, a pigpen cipher or a Masonic code where the geometric placement of the symbols holds as much meaning as the symbols themselves. It becomes a test, a gatekeeping mechanism to ensure that only those initiated into a specific tradition could ever hope to understand the true instructions. This is not unlike the infamous Zodiac killer's ciphers, which taunted authorities for decades. The Zodiac used complex substitutions and homophones to obscure his messages, a deliberate act of intellectual superiority. On Oak Island, the cipher would serve a similar psychological purpose, not to taunt but to filter. It separates the worthy seeker from the random fortune hunter. Beyond the stone, strange symbols have been found on other island artifacts and even sketched on old searchers' maps. A triangle here, a set of intersecting circles there. Are these mere doodles or are they parts of a larger cartographic code? Some researchers have tried to overlay these symbols onto the island's topography, suggesting they point to a specific bearing or mark the location of a secondary, hidden entrance, perhaps in the swamp or along a forgotten shoreline. The very layout of the island's mysterious structures, the money pit, the stone triangle, the drilled rocks, might themselves form a giant cipher when seen from above, a pattern only visible to someone who knows what to look for. Attempts to break these codes have consumed cryptographers and amateur sleuths alike. They have applied every technique from frequency analysis, which studies how often certain symbols appear, to more esoteric methods tied to gematria, the ancient practice of assigning numerical value to letters. Yet a definitive solution remains elusive. This enduring resistance to decryption is perhaps the strongest argument for its authenticity. A hoax would likely be simpler, more easily solved. The complexity and longevity of the puzzle suggest that whatever lies at the heart of Oak Island was considered so valuable, so dangerous, or so sacred, that its creators invested not only in a physical fortress, but in a linguistic one, ensuring their secret would be kept until someone truly worthy of the answer finally arrived. The sheer variety of clues points in a dozen directions, yet no single theory can claim them all. What if we have been asking the wrong question? Instead of wondering which group built the money pit, we should ask if they all had a hand in it. The evidence does not have to contradict. It can instead tell a story of layers of different hands adding to the mystery across centuries. Imagine the first visitors were not treasure hunters but guardians. Perhaps a small group of Templar survivors arrived in the 1400s, carrying a sacred relic too precious to risk in the wars of Europe. They would have chosen this isolated island for its secrecy. Using their knowledge of sacred geometry and construction, they could have dug a deep, ceremonial shaft, a vault meant to be permanent and pure. This would explain the early carbon-dated wood and symbols that hint at a medieval spiritual origin. Then, decades or even a century later, a very different group arrives. A Spanish galleon damaged in a storm and fleeing English privateers limps into the bay. The captain and his crew, desperate to save the king's gold, discover the existing, abandoned pit. They see its potential immediately, but they are practical men, military men. They do not understand the relic's sacred nature. They only see a deep hole that needs better protection. So they set to work, employing their skills in mining and engineering to add the devastating flood tunnels, turning a holy repository into an impregnable bank vault. Their lost coin and sword fragment are the traces they leave behind. Time marches on. In the 1700s, the British military, needing a secure location for their payroll during the American Revolution, stumbles upon the site. Their engineers survey the already complex system and see a masterpiece of military defense. They might have even improved it, reinforcing the drains at Smith's Cove or adding their own markers. They used it, but they did not necessarily build it from scratch. This sequential collaboration elegantly explains the conflicting carbon dates, the mix of sacred and military artifacts, and the blend of spiritual symbolism with ruthless engineering. The pit becomes a palimpsest, a manuscript written and rewritten by different authors across 300 years. Each group found the existing structure and modified it for their own purpose, adding their own layer of defense and their own unique signature to the ground. They were all the architects of Oak Island, but they never knew each other. They were partners in a secret project separated by time, their collective labor creating a mystery so deep and so tangled that it would forever conceal the truth of them all. So many hands seem to have touched this island, each leaving a ghostly fingerprint. We are left with a chorus of possibilities, a puzzle where every piece fits, yet the final picture remains just out of sight. Was it pirates driven by greed to construct a vault for their plunder, only to be lost to the sea or the gallows? Or were they Knights Templar, warrior monks crossing an ocean to protect a relic of such profound holiness that it demanded an eternal, booby-trapped shrine? Perhaps the truth is more pragmatic, born from the desperation of war, where British or French military engineers used their formidable skill to safeguard a fortune meant for armies, a national secret buried with chilling efficiency. The evidence itself is a beautiful contradiction, a tangled web of timelines. A Spanish coin rests beside a lead cross, while coconut fiber from tropical seas lies entangled with oak logs cut centuries apart. This is not a mystery with a single answer, but a story written in layers where each theory adds its own rich, compelling chapter to the legend. This enduring fascination speaks to something deep within us. It is not merely the lure of gold, but the irresistible pull of an unsolved riddle. The Oak Island money pit is a testament to human ingenuity, obsession, and the thrilling possibility that history holds secrets grander than we ever dreamed. We have followed the clues through the centuries, but the final chapter is still unwritten. What do you believe lies at the bottom of the pit? Share your own theory in the comments below, and join us as we continue to unravel the world's greatest historical mysteries.